A millionaire found a homeless woman identical to his late wife, living on the streets with twins. What he discovered left him crying on his knee. Before we begin, subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Enjoy the story. Michael Warren had everything a man could dream of: wealth, power, and influence. But none of it mattered anymore. For the past 3 years, his life had been a hollow shell. The light extinguished when he lost his beloved wife, Emily, to a sudden illness. Since then, Michael had thrown himself into his work, building his company into one of the most successful in the nation. But not even his greatest accomplishments could fill the void Emily left behind. It was a chilly autumn afternoon when Michael, restless from another long day of meetings, decided to take an impromptu walk through the city. He had no particular destination in mind, only a vague hope that the crisp air and the hum of life around him might offer some distraction from the loneliness that clung to him like a shadow. The streets were bustling with people, shoppers carrying bags, street performers entertaining crowds, and vendors shouting to advertise their goods. Michael moved through it all like a ghost, his hands buried in the pockets of his tailored coat, his thoughts miles away. That was when something, or rather, someone, caught his eye. Sitting on a tattered blanket near the entrance of a coffee shop was a woman. She cradled 2 small children, her arms wrapped protectively around them. Her clothes were worn and mismatched, her hair unkempt, but none of that mattered. Michael's heart stopped as his gaze fixed on her face. It was as if time had rewound. She looked exactly like Emily. He stood frozen, his mind racing to make sense of what he was seeing. It couldn't be her. Emily was gone. And yet, this woman's features were identical. The high cheekbones, the soft curve of her jawline, and those hauntingly familiar eyes. It was all there. Michael's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, he wondered if grief had finally driven him to hallucinate. But the twins in her arms brought him back to reality. They couldn't have been older than 3, their tiny faces pressed against the woman's shoulders. One of them glanced up at him, their bright green eyes locking with his. Michael felt a jolt, as if struck by lightning. Those eyes, they were the same shade as Emily's. He took a cautious step forward, his heart pounding. The woman noticed him and instinctively tightened her grip on the children, her body tensing as if preparing for a fight. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice sharp but trembling. Michael opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He felt like he was staring at a ghost, his mind struggling to process what was happening. Finally, he managed to stammer, I'm sorry. You look like someone I knew." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across her face. "Well, I'm not her," she said curtly. "So, if you don't mind." "I don't mean to intrude," Michael said quickly, his tone softening. Are you all right? Do you need anything?" The woman's defensive posture didn't relax. "We're fine," she replied flatly, though the hollow look in her eyes told a different story. One of the twins whimpered softly, drawing her attention. She adjusted the child in her arms and sighed. "Look, I don't know what you want, but we're not charity cases." Michael raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to judge," he said. I feel like I was meant to meet you today. I know it sounds strange, but there's something about you and your kids. Please, let me help." The woman hesitated, her gaze darting between him and the bustling crowd behind him. Finally, she sighed and said, "Why would someone like you want to help someone like me? You don't even know me." Michael didn't have a good answer, only a feeling he couldn't explain. "Maybe I don't," he admitted, "but I'd like to change that. Here." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek business card, handing it to her. "My name is Michael Warren. If you ever need anything, a meal, a place to stay, please call me." She stared at the card for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Eventually, she took it, slipping it into her pocket without a word. "What's your name?" Michael asked gently. She hesitated again before replying, "Claire. And these are my kids." Michael nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It's nice to meet you, Claire. I hope you'll give me a chance to help." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away, his heart heavy with emotions he couldn't name. As he disappeared into the crowd, Claire pulled the card from her pocket and stared at it, her fingers tracing the embossed lettering. Something about Michael felt different, and though she didn't want to admit it, a tiny part of her was tempted to call. That night, Michael couldn't stop thinking about Claire and the twins. Their faces haunted him, especially the twins' green eyes. He felt an inexplicable connection to them, as if they were tied to his past in some way he didn't yet understand. He knew he had to find out more, no matter what it took. The next morning, Michael sat at the edge of his bed, his thoughts still consumed by the woman he had met on the street. Claire. Her name echoed in his mind, along with the faces of her children. No matter how much he tried to focus on his daily routine, he couldn't shake the feeling that meeting her wasn't just a coincidence. Her resemblance to Emily was far too striking, and those twins, something about them pulled at his heart in a way he couldn't explain. Michael had spent the better part of the morning pacing his office, unable to focus on the endless stream of emails and phone calls that usually occupied his time. His assistant Cheryl had knocked several times, gently reminding him of meetings he had already postponed. But Michael waved her off, his mind elsewhere. The memory of Claire, sitting on that tattered blanket, haunted him. Who was she? How had she ended up in such a dire situation? He stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, the city skyline sprawling before him like a vast maze. For the first time in years, Michael felt a glimmer of purpose that had nothing to do with work. He picked up his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he landed on a familiar name, Jack Harmon, his trusted private investigator. Michael hesitated for a moment before pressing the call button. Jack picked up on the second ring. "Michael, it's been a while. What can I do for you?" "Jack," Michael began, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "I need you to look into someone for me. Her name is Claire. She's living on the streets with 2 young kids. I don't know much about her background, but there's something about her I need to understand." Jack didn't question him, as usual. "Consider it done. I'll start digging and get back to you as soon as I find something." Michael hung up and set the phone down, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. He wasn't sure what he hoped to find, but he knew he couldn't rest until he had answers. That evening, just as Michael was about to leave the office, his phone buzzed. The screen lit up with an unknown number. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" A soft, hesitant voice came through the line. "Mr. Warren, this is Claire. We met yesterday." Michael's heart skipped a beat. He straightened in his chair, his voice instantly warm. "Claire, I'm so glad you called. Are you and the kids all right?" There was a pause, and then she sighed. "We're okay." She hesitated, and Michael could hear the weight of her uncertainty. "I don't usually do this, but the twins haven't eaten much today. If your offer for a meal is still open, I'd like to take you up on it." Michael didn't hesitate. "Of course. I'm glad you called. Where are you now?" "We're near the coffee shop where we met," she replied. Her voice was cautious, as if bracing for disappointment. "Stay there," Michael said firmly. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." As he grabbed his coat and headed out, Michael felt an unfamiliar mix of anticipation and nervousness. He didn't want to overwhelm Claire or make her feel like a charity case, but he also couldn't ignore the pull he felt to help her. By the time his car pulled up to the coffee shop, he spotted her standing by the curb, holding the twins' hands tightly. She looked nervous, her eyes darting around as if expecting judgment from every passerby. Michael stepped out of the car and smiled warmly. "Claire, it's good to see you again." She nodded, her grip on the twins tightening. "Thanks for coming." Michael opened the car door for them, and the twins' eyes lit up as they climbed into the luxurious interior. Claire hesitated for a moment before following them, her posture tense. The ride was quiet, save for the twins' excited whispers as they marveled at the leather seats and soft lighting. Michael caught glimpses of their wide-eyed wonder in the rear-view mirror and felt a pang of sadness. They deserved so much more than what life had given them. He took them to a cozy family-style restaurant, choosing a quiet booth in the corner to give Claire and the kids some privacy. The twins immediately brightened when they saw the menu, their small hands eagerly pointing out dishes they had probably only dreamed of trying. Michael encouraged them to order whatever they wanted, his heart warming at their excitement. As the food arrived, Michael turned his attention to Claire, who had barely touched her plate. "You don't have to be shy," he said gently. "This is for you, too." Claire looked down at her hands, her voice barely audible. "I'm just not used to this kindness." Michael leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Claire, I meant what I said. I want to help. But I also want to understand. How did you end up here?" Her posture stiffened, and for a moment, Michael thought she wouldn't answer. But then she exhaled deeply, as if releasing years of pent-up frustration. "It's a long story," she said quietly. "I used to have a decent life, a job, a place to live. But things fell apart when the twins' father left. I tried to keep it together, but I couldn't. One bad thing led to another, and here we are." Michael's heart ached at the pain in her voice. "You've been through so much," he said softly, "but you're still standing. That says a lot about your strength." Claire gave a small, bitter laugh. "Strength doesn't pay the bills or feed your kids. I'm just trying to survive." Michael reached across the table, his hand resting on hers for a brief moment. "You don't have to do it alone anymore. Let me help." She looked at him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and fear. "Why do you care so much? You don't even know me." Michael hesitated, unsure how to explain the unshakable connection he felt. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "life puts people in our path for a reason. I don't know why, but I feel like I was meant to meet you." Claire didn't respond, but her silence spoke volumes. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope, just a little, that things might get better. As Michael drove them back to their shelter that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had changed in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. And as Claire and the twins disappeared into the building, Michael made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth about her past, no matter what it took. Michael woke up the next morning with a sense of determination. He couldn't stop thinking about Claire and her children. Their situation tugged at him in ways he hadn't felt since losing Emily. Those green eyes haunted him. They carried a familiarity that stirred something deep within his soul. It was more than just a coincidence, and Michael couldn't let go. He sat at his kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee as the city buzzed to life outside his penthouse windows. The memory of Claire's weary face, her hesitant trust, and the twins' innocent laughter lingered in his mind. He opened his phone and scrolled to his recent calls, tapping on Jack Harmon's name. "Michael," Jack answered, his voice steady and professional. "I was about to call you. I've already found some preliminary information." Michael straightened in his chair. "What did you find?" "Claire Riley," Jack began. "She's in her early 30s, and she's had a rough few years. From what I could gather, she used to work in healthcare, a nurse, I believe, but she lost her job about 4 years ago. After that, it seems like everything spiraled. Eviction notices, debt collectors, and eventually, she ended up on the streets." Michael frowned, his grip tightening on his coffee mug. "What about her kids?" "The twins. They were born around the time she lost her job," Jack continued. "There's no record of their father sticking around. It looks like she's been raising them on her own since day one." Michael's heart ached for Claire. He couldn't imagine the strength it must have taken to endure all that and still keep going. But Jack's tone shifted, signaling that he wasn't done. "There's one more thing," he added cautiously. "Her last name, Riley. It's the same as Emily's maiden name. Michael's breath caught. You're sure? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Positive, Jack confirmed. It could be coincidence, but given what you told me about her resemblance to Emily, it might be worth looking into. Michael leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. If Claire was somehow connected to Emily, why had Emily never mentioned her? Was it possible that Claire was a distant relative? Or was there something deeper at play? Keep digging, Michael said finally. I need to know everything. Will do, Jack replied. I'll be in touch. Michael ended the call and set his phone down, staring out the window as the weight of the revelation settled over him. If Claire was connected to Emily, he had to find out the truth. For her, for the twins, and for himself. Later that day, Michael decided to pay Claire another visit. He called ahead, letting her know he'd like to stop by. Claire hesitated, but eventually agreed, her voice tinged with curiosity and caution. When he arrived at the shelter, she greeted him at the door, the twins peeking out from behind her legs. You didn't have to come all this way, she said, her tone guarded but polite. I wanted to check on you, Michael replied, offering a warm smile. And I thought I'd bring something for the kids. He held up a bag filled with small toys and books. The twins' faces lit up, their shyness melting away as they reached for the bag. Thank you, one of them said, his voice filled with excitement. Claire gave him a faint smile, her defenses softening just a little. That's very kind of you. They sat together in the shelter's common area, the twins engrossed in their new toys while Michael and Claire talked. He could tell she was still hesitant to open up, but he decided to take a chance. Claire, he began carefully, I've been doing some thinking since we met. You remind me so much of someone I cared about deeply, my late wife, Emily. Claire's expression shifted, her brow furrowing in confusion. Your wife. Michael nodded, his voice soft. She passed away 3 years ago. But when I saw you, it was like seeing her again. And then I found out something that made me wonder if there's a connection. What kind of connection? Claire asked, her tone wary. Your last name, Michael said. Riley. That was Emily's maiden name. I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but I had to ask. Claire stared at him, her expression a mixture of surprise and suspicion. I don't know what to say, she admitted. I don't know much about my family. I was adopted when I was a baby. All I know is that my birth mother's name was Emily. But I always thought it was just a name. Michael's heart raced. Adopted? Claire, this could mean... I don't want to get my hopes up, she interrupted, her voice tight. I've spent my whole life wondering who my real parents were. But I stopped hoping for answers a long time ago. Michael reached out, his voice gentle but firm. What if we could find those answers? Would you want to know the truth? Claire hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. I don't know, she whispered. What if it's not what I want to hear? Then, at least you'll have closure, Michael said. But if there's even a chance that Emily was your mother, don't you want to know? The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Finally, Claire nodded, her voice barely audible. All right, let's find out. Michael felt a surge of relief and determination. He didn't know what the truth would reveal, but he was ready to face it, no matter what. The following day, Michael wasted no time in setting the wheels in motion to uncover the truth. His conversation with Claire had left him more determined than ever to get answers, not just for his own peace of mind, but for hers as well. If there was even the slightest chance that Claire was connected to Emily, he owed it to both of them to find out. That morning, Michael made a call to his doctor, explaining the situation with careful discretion. By noon, a DNA testing kit was delivered to his office. He had arranged for the results to be expedited, ensuring they would have an answer within a few days. As he examined the sleek box containing the test, he felt a mixture of anticipation and unease. What if the results confirmed his suspicions? What if they didn't? Either way, his life, and Claire's, would never be the same. Later that afternoon, Michael called Claire and asked if he could visit her. She sounded hesitant at first, but when he explained that he had a way to uncover the truth about their potential connection, she reluctantly agreed. When Michael arrived at the shelter, Claire was waiting for him in the small, dimly lit common room. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. The twins sat on the floor nearby, stacking colorful blocks into wobbly towers. They greeted Michael with shy smiles, their bright green eyes sparkling with curiosity. "What's this about?" Claire asked, her tone wary. Michael set the DNA test kit on the table between them. "This," he began, "is a way to know for sure if there's a connection between you and Emily. It's a simple test, a cheek swab, and we'll have results in a few days." Claire stared at the box, her expression unreadable. "And what happens if there's no connection?" she asked quietly. "What does that mean for us?" Michael met her gaze, his voice steady. "It doesn't change anything. I'll still be here to help, no matter what. But if there is a connection, I think it could bring you some closure. Maybe even answers you've been looking for your whole life." Claire exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her thoughts. Finally, she nodded. "All right, let's do it." Michael opened the kit and carefully explained the process. The twins were the first to go, giggling as Michael swabbed the inside of their cheeks. "It tickles," one of them exclaimed, making the other laugh. The sound filled the room with a warmth that momentarily eased the tension. Next, it was Claire's turn. She sat stiffly as Michael handed her the swab, her movements cautious and deliberate. When it was done, Michael sealed the samples in their designated containers and placed them back in the box. "I'll send this off right away," he said. "We should have the results in a few days." Claire nodded, but her expression remained guarded. "I'm not sure if I'm ready for what those results might say," she admitted. "What if she really was my mother? Why didn't she come looking for me? Why didn't she tell you about me?" Michael leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "I don't know why Emily made the choices she did, but I do know that she was a kind, compassionate person. Whatever her reasons were, I believe she thought she was doing what was best." As she had known about the twins, his voice trailed off as he glanced at the children playing on the floor. She would have loved them. Claire's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she quickly looked away, unwilling to let her emotions show. "I guess we'll find out soon enough," she said quietly. Over the next few days, Michael and Claire tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy as they waited for the results. Michael visited the shelter regularly, bringing small gifts for the twins and spending time with them. He marveled at their resilience, their ability to find joy in the simplest things despite the hardships they faced. It reminded him of Emily, her boundless optimism, her belief in the goodness of people. Claire, on the other hand, seemed more guarded than ever. Michael could see the conflict in her eyes every time he brought up the test. She wanted answers, but she was also terrified of what they might reveal. She kept herself busy, focusing on the twins and avoiding the topic whenever she could. On the third day, Michael received the notification he had been waiting for. The test results were ready. He sat in his office, staring at his computer screen as his heart pounded in his chest. With a deep breath, he clicked the link and opened the report. Positive. The test confirmed a genetic match between Emily and Claire. Michael's suspicions were true. Claire was Emily's biological daughter, and the twins were her grandchildren. The realization hit him like a tidal wave, leaving him breathless. For a moment, he simply sat there, staring at the screen as emotions surged through him. Shock, relief, sadness, and a strange sense of fulfillment. He had uncovered the truth, but it came with a bittersweet sting. Emily had carried this secret to her grave, and now it was up to him to bridge the gap between the past and the present. Michael picked up his phone and called Claire. She answered on the second ring, her voice tense. "Michael, did you get the results?" "I did," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Claire, the test was positive. Emily was your mother. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Claire finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. She was my mother. Her tone was a mix of disbelief and pain. Why didn't she ever try to find me? I don't know, Michael admitted, his heart aching for her. But I do know that she loved deeply. I think she carried the memory of you with her every day, even if she couldn't bring herself to talk about it. Claire didn't respond immediately, but Michael could hear her quiet sobs through the phone. She gave me up, she said, her voice trembling. But she never stopped loving you, Michael countered gently. I truly believe that. As the call ended, Michael made a silent vow to honor Emily's memory by helping Claire and the twins build a better future. They had lost so much, but now they had a chance to heal. Together. The next morning, Michael awoke with a heavy heart. The DNA results had confirmed what he had suspected. Claire was Emily's daughter, and the twins were her grandchildren. But instead of feeling closure, Michael found himself grappling with new questions. Why had Emily never mentioned Claire? What had driven her to keep such a monumental part of her life a secret? As he sat in his study, sipping a cup of coffee, Michael's eyes drifted to a bookshelf in the corner of the room. Tucked among the neatly arranged books were Emily's journals and keepsakes, left untouched since her passing. He hadn't had the courage to go through them until now, but something told him the answers he sought might lie within those pages. Setting his mug down, Michael crossed the room and carefully pulled a small leather-bound box from the shelf. It was one of Emily's most treasured possessions, a place where she kept letters, photographs, and mementos from significant moments in her life. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing a stack of neatly folded papers tied with a delicate ribbon. Among them was an envelope addressed to him, written in Emily's elegant handwriting. The date on the corner of the envelope sent a shiver down his spine. It had been written just weeks before her death. Michael's heart pounded as he unfolded the letter and began to read. My dearest Michael, if you're reading this, it means I am no longer by your side. I've tried to find the words to tell you this in person, but every time I gather the courage, my heart falters. So I've written it here, in the hope that you'll understand and forgive me. There is something I've kept hidden from you, something I've carried with me for many years. Before I met you, I made a choice that has haunted me every day of my life. I was young, scared, and alone when I gave birth to a baby girl. Her name was Claire. I wasn't ready to be a mother, and I believed giving her up for adoption was the best thing I could do for her. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about her, wondering if she was safe, happy, and loved. When I met you, Michael, I found a love so profound that it felt like redemption. You made me whole in ways I never thought possible. But even in my happiest moments, I carried the weight of my decision, the memory of the daughter I gave away. I wanted to tell you about her, but I feared it would change the way you saw me, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. If there is ever a way to find Claire, please do. She is a part of me, and I hope you can offer her the love and support I never could. And if she has children, tell them that their grandmother loved them deeply, even if she never had the chance to meet them. Thank you, Michael, for being my greatest blessing, for loving me, flaws and all. I only wish I could have been braver for both of us. Forever yours, Emily. By the time Michael finished reading, tears streamed down his face. Emily had carried this burden in silence, and now he understood why. She had been trying to protect everyone, even at the cost of her own happiness. The letter was both a confession and a plea, a final act of love from a woman who had always put others before herself. Michael carefully refolded the letter and placed it back in the box, his mind racing. He knew he had to share it with Claire. She deserved to hear Emily's words, to know that her mother had never stopped thinking about her. Later that afternoon, Michael called Claire and asked if they could meet. His voice was thick with emotion, and Claire immediately sensed that something was different. Is everything okay? She asked cautiously. I found something, Michael replied. "It's a letter from Emily. I think you should read it." Claire hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. "A letter," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Michael said gently. "It's for both of us." They met at a quiet park near the shelter, where the twins could play while Michael and Claire talked. The autumn leaves rustled softly in the breeze, creating a serene backdrop for what was about to unfold. Claire sat on a bench, her hands clenched tightly in her lap as Michael handed her the letter. "This was written shortly before Emily passed," he explained. "I think it'll answer some of the questions you've been carrying." Claire took the letter, her fingers trembling as she unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the words, and as she read, tears began to stream down her face. By the time she finished, she was sobbing, clutching the letter to her chest as if it were a lifeline. "She thought about me," Claire choked out, her voice thick with emotion. "She cared." "She did," Michael said softly. "She cared more than you'll ever know. She wanted to find you, but I think she was afraid. Afraid of how you might feel, afraid of what it might mean for our life together." Claire wiped her tears, her expression a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. "I always wondered why she gave me up," she admitted. "But now I think I understand. She was trying to give me a better life." Michael reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "And now we have a chance to honor her memory, to build the connection she always wanted for us." Claire nodded, her resolve strengthening. "I want to know more about her," she said. "I want my kids to know about their grandmother." "And they will," Michael promised. "We'll make sure they know everything." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in a warm golden glow, Michael and Claire sat together in silence, the letter resting between them. It was a moment of healing, a bridge between the past and the future. For the first time, Claire felt like she belonged, like she had found a piece of herself that had been missing for so long. And for Michael, the burden of Emily's secret was replaced with a sense of purpose. Together, they would carry her legacy forward, ensuring that her love continued to shine through the lives she had touched. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for both Michael and Claire. The discovery of Emily's letter had opened a floodgate of feelings, grief, love, and a bittersweet sense of closure. For Claire, it was as if a lifelong void had been partially filled. She now had answers to questions that had haunted her for years. For Michael, the letter reaffirmed his decision to bring Claire and her twins into his life. He felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility, not just for them, but for honoring Emily's wishes. Michael wasted no time in taking action. He arranged for Claire and the twins to move into a temporary apartment he owned in a quiet part of the city. It wasn't grand, but it was safe, clean, and far better than the shelter they had been living in. When he handed her the keys, Claire hesitated, looking up at him with uncertainty. "This is too much," she said softly, holding the keys in her hand like they were made of gold. "I can't accept this." "Yes, you can," Michael replied gently but firmly. "Emily wanted you to have a better life, and I want to make that happen. This isn't charity, Claire. It's family." The word family hit her like a tidal wave. She had spent so much of her life feeling alone, disconnected, and now, here was Michael offering her something she had always yearned for, a sense of belonging. After a long pause, she nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Moving day was filled with excitement for the twins, who ran from room to room in the apartment, marveling at the space and exploring every corner. Michael had made sure the apartment was stocked with essentials, as well as a few surprises for the children, new toys, books, and even a small set of bunk beds that made their eyes light up with joy. "Mommy, look," one of the twins called out, pointing to a stuffed bear sitting on the bed. Claire smiled, her heart swelling at the sight of her children's happiness. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope that things might finally be looking up. As the day wound down, Michael sat with Claire in the small but cozy living room. The twins were fast asleep in their new beds, their laughter from earlier still echoing in his mind. "This is just the beginning," Michael said, his voice calm and reassuring. "We'll take it one step at a time, but I want you to know I'm here for you. For all of you." Claire nodded, her gaze distant. "It's still hard to believe all of this is happening," she admitted. "For so long, I thought I was invisible. Just another person struggling to get by. And now—" "You're not invisible, Claire," Michael interrupted. "You're Emily's daughter. That makes you family, and family takes care of each other." Claire looked at him, her defenses finally starting to come down. "Thank you," she said again, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay you." "You don't have to," Michael replied. "This isn't about repayment. It's about giving you and the twins a chance to thrive." In the days that followed, Michael worked tirelessly to ensure Claire and the twins were well supported. He enrolled the children in a nearby preschool, their tuition covered without question. He also helped Claire begin the process of finding a job, though he made it clear there was no rush. "Take the time you need to settle in," he told her. "The rest will come." Despite her initial reluctance, Claire began to trust Michael more with each passing day. She shared stories from her past, about her struggles, her dreams, and her fears. Michael listened intently, learning more about the woman who bore such a striking resemblance to Emily, not just in appearance, but in resilience and strength. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Michael brought out a photo album he had kept since Emily's passing. "I thought you might like to see these," he said, handing the album to Claire. She opened it slowly, her fingers tracing the edges of the photos. The first picture was of Emily on her wedding day, her radiant smile lighting up the frame. Claire's breath hitched as she stared at the image. "She was beautiful," she whispered. "She was," Michael agreed, his voice filled with fondness. "And she had a heart to match. She would have loved you, Claire. I'm sure of it." As they turned the pages, Michael shared stories about Emily, how they had met, the adventures they had shared, and the small, everyday moments that had made their love so special. Claire listened intently, her eyes glistening with tears. "I wish I could have known her," she said quietly. "It feels like I missed out on so much." Michael placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You didn't miss out, Claire. She's still a part of you, and now you have a chance to carry her legacy forward." But even as they began to build a connection, there were still moments of doubt and hesitation. One evening, as Claire tucked the twins into bed, she found herself wondering if this new life was too good to be true. Could she really trust Michael? Would this sense of stability last, or was it just a temporary reprieve before the rug was pulled out from under her again? Michael, too, had his own moments of uncertainty. He often found himself staring at Emily's letter late at night, reading her words over and over. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover, more questions to answer about Emily's past and the choices she had made. Despite their doubts, both Michael and Claire were determined to move forward. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew they weren't alone anymore. For the first time in a long time, they had hope. And as the days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger, paving the way for a future that neither of them could have imagined. The weeks that followed were transformative for both Michael and Claire. The twins had settled into their new preschool, their laughter echoing through the halls of their apartment as they shared stories about their day. Claire, while still cautious, had started to let her guard down, slowly opening up to the possibilities of a new life. For Michael, the process of helping them find stability had filled a void he hadn't realized was still there, a purpose that extended beyond his wealth and influence. But amidst the newfound stability, lingering questions about Emily's past weighed heavily on Michael's mind. Her letter had revealed her deep regret and love for Claire, but it had also left much unsaid. Why hadn't Emily told him about Claire during their marriage? And what had led her to give up her daughter in the first place? These unanswered questions gnawed at him, driving him to delve deeper into Emily's life. One evening, after Claire had put the twins to bed, Michael invited her over for dinner at his penthouse. As they sat in the elegant dining room, sipping wine and enjoying a quiet moment away from the chaos of daily life, Michael decided to broach the subject that had been on his mind. "Claire," he began, his tone careful, "there's something I've been thinking about. Emily's letter gave us some answers, but I feel like there's still more to her story, more that we don't know." Claire set her glass down, her brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" Michael leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Emily mentioned giving you up for adoption, but she didn't explain why. I think there might be more to it, and I feel like we owe it to her, and to you, to find out the truth." Claire's initial reaction was guarded, her walls going up instinctively. "Michael, I've spent my whole life wondering why my birth mother gave me up. I don't know if I can handle digging into it now, not when things are finally starting to feel normal." "I understand," Michael said gently, "but I think this could bring us both closure. And if it's too much for you, I can take the lead. You don't have to face this alone." Claire hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. She had spent so many years burying the pain of her abandonment, convincing herself that she didn't need answers to move forward. But now, with Michael by her side and the twins thriving, she felt a spark of courage she hadn't known was there. "Okay," she said finally, her voice quiet but resolute. "Let's do it." Michael contacted Jack Harmon the next morning, explaining the new direction of their investigation. Jack, ever the professional, assured Michael that he would leave no stone unturned. Within days, he uncovered a lead, a name that appeared in both Emily's medical records and adoption documents: Margaret Riley. Margaret, it turned out, was Emily's mother and Claire's biological grandmother. According to the records, Margaret had been involved in the decision to place Claire for adoption. Michael was stunned. Emily had never spoken about her family, and now he understood why. Her relationship with her mother must have been fraught with pain and secrecy. "Margaret Riley is still alive," Jack told Michael over the phone. "She's living in a retirement home about 2 hours from here. If you want answers, she might be the one to provide them." Michael relayed the news to Claire that evening. She was visibly shaken by the revelation, her emotions a mix of curiosity, fear, and anger. "She's alive," Claire repeated, her voice trembling. "All this time, my grandmother was alive, and I never knew." Michael placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We can go together," he offered, "but only if you're ready." Claire nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. "I need to know," she said. "I need to hear it from her." The drive to the retirement home was filled with tense silence, punctuated only by the occasional question from Claire. "What if she doesn't want to see me?" she asked at one point, her voice tinged with doubt. "She will," Michael assured her. "And if she doesn't, we'll still leave with the knowledge that we tried." When they arrived, the receptionist directed them to a sunlit garden where Margaret often spent her afternoons. Michael and Claire walked side by side, their steps heavy with anticipation. Finally, they saw her, a frail woman with silver hair, sitting on a bench and feeding birds from a small bag of seeds. Claire hesitated, her feet rooted to the ground. Michael gently nudged her forward. "You can do this," he said softly. Taking a deep breath, Claire approached the bench. "Margaret Riley?" she asked, her voice wavering. The elderly woman turned, her sharp blue eyes narrowing as she took in Claire's face. For a moment, there was only silence, and then Margaret's expression softened, her lips trembling. "You look just like her," she whispered. "Like who?" Claire asked, her heart pounding. "Emily," Margaret said, tears welling in her eyes. "You look just like my daughter." Michael stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on Claire's back. "This is Claire," he said gently. "She's Emily's daughter." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in shock. "Claire, "My Claire," she choked out. "Oh, my dear, I thought I'd never see you again." The three of them sat together on the bench, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Margaret explained how she and Emily had made the painful decision to place Claire for adoption. "Emily was so young," Margaret said, her voice thick with regret. "She was just a teenager, and we didn't have the means to support a child. I thought I was helping you, but it broke her heart. She never forgave me." Claire listened intently, her emotions swirling as Margaret's words painted a picture of a scared young Emily forced to make an impossible choice. "Why didn't she try to find me later?" Claire asked, her voice cracking. "She wanted to," Margaret replied, "but she was afraid. She thought you might hate her for giving you up. And when she met Michael, she didn't want to risk losing the happiness she'd found." Michael squeezed Claire's hand, his heart aching for both her and Emily. "She never stopped thinking about you," he said softly. "She wrote about you in her letter. She wanted you to know how much she loved you." Tears streamed down Claire's face as she absorbed the truth. It wasn't the perfect reunion she had dreamed of as a child, but it was real. It was closure. As the sun began to set, Michael and Claire said their goodbyes to Margaret, promising to visit again soon. On the drive back, Claire leaned her head against the window, her heart heavy but full. "Thank you," she said quietly, turning to Michael, "for helping me find her, for everything." Michael smiled, his own heart full of gratitude. "You're not alone anymore, Claire. We'll get through this together." As the city lights came into view, Claire realized that for the first time in her life, she felt truly connected to her past, to her family, and to the future that lay ahead. In the days following their emotional meeting with Margaret, both Michael and Claire felt as if a weight had been lifted. The pieces of Emily's past had finally begun to come together, filling in the gaps that had haunted them both. For Claire, knowing that her mother had never stopped loving her and had been forced to make an impossible choice, brought a bittersweet sense of closure. For Michael, it was as if he could finally honor Emily's memory by helping the family she had left behind. But closure didn't mean the journey was over. If anything, it was just the beginning. Michael had been quietly working on something special. He had spoken with a team of attorneys and financial advisors, determined to create a stable future for Claire and the twins. One evening, as they sat in Claire's modest apartment, Michael placed a thick envelope on the coffee table between them. "What's this?" Claire asked, eyeing the envelope with suspicion. "Open it," Michael said, his voice calm but firm. Claire hesitated, then picked up the envelope and slid its contents onto the table. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents. A deed to a house, an education trust for the twins, and an official offer of employment for her as an outreach coordinator at a foundation Michael was creating in Emily's memory. What is all this?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "It's your future," Michael said simply. "The house is yours. It's in a quiet neighborhood, close to the twins' school. The trust will cover their education all the way through college. And the job? Well, that's up to you. The foundation will focus on helping single mothers and homeless families get back on their feet. I can't think of anyone better suited to lead that effort." Claire's hands shook as she held the papers. "Michael, this is too much. I can't accept all of this." Michael reached out, placing a comforting hand on hers. "Claire, this isn't about charity. This is about giving you and the twins the life Emily will have wanted for you. And it's about carrying forward her legacy. She believed in second chances, in helping those who needed it most. You're a part of that legacy." Tears streamed down Claire's face as she listened. For so long, she had felt like a burden, someone undeserving of help or kindness. But here was Michael offering her not just material support, but a chance to rebuild her life with dignity and purpose. "I don't know how to thank you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to," Michael replied with a gentle smile. "Just promise me you'll take this opportunity and make the most of it." Claire nodded, her tears turning into a smile. I will. I promise. Moving into the new house was a transformative experience for Claire and the twins. The moment they stepped through the front door, the children ran from room to room, their laughter echoing through the empty halls. Claire stood in the living room, her hand over her mouth as she took it all in. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of security, a place to call home. Michael had ensured the house was fully furnished, with thoughtful touches that reflected both practicality and warmth. The twins' room was filled with books and toys, while Claire's room had a small desk where she could begin planning her work for the foundation. The kitchen was stocked with groceries, and the living room had a cozy sofa where they could gather as a family. As Claire unpacked boxes and arranged the children's belongings, she couldn't help but think of Emily. She wondered what her mother would have thought of all this, of the house, of the foundation, of the grandchildren she never got to meet. It filled her with a mix of sadness and gratitude, a reminder that while Emily was gone, her spirit lived on in the choices they were making now. The foundation's launch event was scheduled for a month later, and Michael insisted that Claire take center stage as the spokesperson. At first, she was hesitant. Public speaking wasn't something she had ever been comfortable with, and the idea of sharing her story with strangers made her nervous. "You don't have to share anything you're not ready to," Michael reassured her. "But your story is powerful, Claire. It's what this foundation is all about. Hope, resilience, and second chances." With Michael's encouragement, Claire decided to embrace the opportunity. On the day of the event, she stood backstage, her heart racing as she listened to the opening remarks. The room was filled with supporters, donors, and community leaders, all gathered to celebrate the launch of the Emily Warren Foundation. When it was her turn to speak, Claire took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The audience fell silent as she approached the podium, her hands gripping the edges for support. "Good evening," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "My name is Claire Riley, and I'm honored to stand here today as a part of the Emily Warren Foundation. This foundation isn't just about providing shelter or financial support. It's about giving people the tools to rebuild their lives, to find hope where they thought there was none." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. "I know this because I was one of those people. Not long ago, I was living on the streets with my 2 young children. I thought I was invisible, that no one cared. But then, something incredible happened. A man named Michael Warren saw me, not just my struggles, but my potential." Claire's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Michael believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And through him, I learned about my mother, Emily, a woman I never got the chance to know, but whose love and kindness have shaped everything we're doing here today. This foundation is her legacy, and I am proud to be a part of it." The room erupted into applause as Claire stepped back from the podium, tears streaming down her face. Michael met her at the edge of the stage, pulling her into a warm embrace. "You were amazing," he whispered. As the event wound down, Michael and Claire stood together, watching the crowd mingle and celebrate the foundation's success. The twins ran around the room, their laughter filling the air as they played with balloons handed out by the staff. "This feels like the start of something big," Claire said, her voice filled with hope. "It is," Michael replied, his gaze steady. "Emily would be so proud of you." Claire smiled, her heart full. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, truly valued. And as she looked around the room at the people she would soon be helping, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Together, Michael and Claire had turned pain into purpose, honoring Emily's memory by building a legacy of love and resilience. The future was uncertain, but they faced it with strength, knowing that they were no longer alone. And now, I want to hear from you. Which part of this story touched your heart the most? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. And of course, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more narratives like this. Each subscription helps us continue bringing exciting stories to you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.